Welcome to the Battlefield Show. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by Sammy Boy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Ready to talk some Battlefield, and today we're going to be talking about kind of the rise of the older games, and we're going to talk about some of the things we love and just kind of highlight those past experiences that we've had, especially now that like so many of them are getting back popular again. So let's jump right in. This podcast is a production of Uplink Media Group. Uplink is a podcast network dedicated to highlighting the love and experience of gaming and pop culture. Check out our other shows, Star Wars Uplink and The Forge, the Halo Infinite podcast, as well as our YouTube channels for even deeper dives into Battlefield, Star Wars, and more. YouTube.com/Uplink podcast and StarWarsUplink.com. Dude, I hate that it had to be the death of Battlefield 2042, but Battlefield 1's coming back, baby.
I do see a lot of love online. I've actually tried getting back into it too, but unfortunately it's just not, and like there's just not enough players in Australia, so I'm kind of a bit jealous, but I'm loving seeing the love around it because
yeah,
it's I wouldn't say it's underappreciated because I think most people like it, but like it didn't, I don't know, it didn't get as much love as Battlefield 4, and I think it needs that. Like it was as good as Battlefield 4 in my opinion, so I'm glad it's getting some love.
Yeah, and I was watching a mini documentary. I love how like the Battlefield community has been like, okay, we're not doing news videos, so I'm going to make like a mini documentary on my thoughts around these things. I was watching one on drawing the correlation of the struggles of Battlefield 2042 and the struggle and the success of Battlefield 1, and how you can tie a correlation of the successes of those games, and it's almost like the drug of that success led to the delusions of Battlefield 2042 of attracting that, because it was a very popular game among more casual FPS players. And I think Battlefield 2042 went a little too heavy on that without looking at kind of what made Battlefield 1 so successful. And it was because the developers wanted to make that game fun. It was exploring a time frame that I think it was like the first AAA game to fully delve into World War I, and they just generally went with such a respect to the game and the history around it, and it attracted so many people. I know people that like are, a friend of mine's dad is, I think, in his 70s and was in the Vietnam War, and they got him Battlefield 1 to play through the campaign, and he loved it. And that's all he did. He just played through the campaign and was a huge fan of it.
Yeah, I think of all of them, I think that's the one, and probably equal with Battlefield 4, but I think even to a bigger extent, it was the one that, like the casual, like, shooter fan base really liked it. I think the whole thing with, what was it, Infinite Warfare from Call of Duty, that was like that was like a big L for Call of Duty. And then Battlefield's trailer, oh dude, the reveal trailer for Battlefield 1 still to this day gives me
so
shivers just thinking about it.
Yep.
It was so good. And I think those two happening at the same time, it really cast a lot of light on Battlefield 1 that it might not have otherwise, because if that was a really good Call of Duty, a lot of those people might not have come over. And I think it was just really good timing for it, because it definitely, I think of all the games, it was the one that deserved the most like recognition, and it was just great to have a lot more of a. It wasn't just like a small community; it was like a big, massive selling game that. To be fair, we don't really see that much with Battlefield. I wouldn't say it's a small game by any means, but it's not. It's never really competed with Call of Duty in terms of sales. But that year, even though Call of Duty sold more, like it was as big, if not probably bigger, because it ended up being way more liked.
I think Battlefield 1 is the most, the biggest sales of any Battlefield title was Battlefield 1.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, yeah.
It's one amazing to look at, but it also shows kind of the comparisons of a successful Battlefield game versus a successful Call of Duty game, because they were touting I think close to 10 or 11 million sales with Battlefield 1 or thereabouts, and like a successful Call of Duty game is like 25 to 30 million sales.
Yeah, well, I think even the last, pretty much since Warzone has picked up, it's now even, like, I think some of them are selling like 50 to 60. Like it's going nuts. So it is crazy how as much as to me they are the two number one shooters. Like when I think of the biggest FPS games, I always just think of Call of Duty and then Battlefield, and the gap between them is actually pretty mental. But it was good that the Battlefield kind of caught up a bit, and it just got a bit of recognition with that game, and I think I think it definitely deserved it for that one.
Mm-hmm. And you can tell just the love and respect that the developers and the team had around that game. Again, it was almost a long shot too. I mean, if you look at it in perspective, like we had so many of the modern day shooters, so it would have been ideal to kind of think about the next Battlefield game being a modern day or near future shooter, but it made a lot of sense to almost go the opposite. It did go the opposite direction of Infinite Warfare, of saying, oh yeah, they're going even further future. We're going to the Great War, and have these historic weapons, completely different play style than an Infinite Warfare.
Yeah, it was crazy contrast actually, because they for years they had been both kind of like modern shooters, and then one went one way and the other went the other way, and it was a very. I still remember that year. I just still remember how crazy. The hype around Battlefield 1 was just amazing. Like I don't know if I've really ever. Maybe Battlefront 2. I don't think I've ever really been as hyped for a game though as Battlefield 1. It was just seeing the trailer, the soundtrack in the trailer, and then at the end seeing the big the airship over and over again. Like it was just crazy. I remember seeing that, and I stayed up like at night to the trailer dropped at like 3 a.m. and I was just up all night waiting for it, and just watched the trailer and then just went to bed. Like I stayed up that long just to see a trailer, but it was so good.
It was the quality there, and just the balance. I think it landed for casual and people that enjoyed the game. I think it did such a great job. One of the big things that's been kind of going around the community is like, I just want, I saw this one meme, and it was a soda station, and it was like all of the Battlefields, and it was holding down the buttons for Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3 in a cup, and it was like what we wanted. So funny. But I think that's what a lot of people wanted, is kind of like this mishmash of Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. Where do you think that like those games really shine in terms of what stands out today? Like even going back, taking off the rose-colored glasses, like what are some of the things that those games make you think of like, man, these are solid video games, not even just Battlefield games?
It's hard to say, because in a way I feel like there wasn't really that much that like drastically stood out. Like I think Battlefield 1 actually stands out more as like a very out there game. Like you said, they took a big leap, and it could have been a huge bust. Like it could have just not worked, but they landed it. And the thing with Battlefield 3 and 4 is I can't really put a finger on what I love about those games. I think it was just the mixture of like, it didn't really excel in any single area, but it was just so well tied together. And like I think the setting, I think modern games for Battlefield just work, like having choppers and stuff, it just works really well. I think for those games, to me it felt like there wasn't actually any specific thing that it did well. Like we always talk about Battlefield 1 and we say, oh, it was so immersive and so like the atmosphere was really good, but in 3 and 4 I don't know what that thing is. I don't really know if there was a specific thing. I think it was just such a well tied together game, at least after launch. Obviously, Battlefield 4's launch was a disaster, but I think just the core, like the gameplay, just even like the Levolution and I don't know, it just was the type of game. It's kind of similar to like Halo Infinite now. There's nothing drastically amazing about it. It's just such a well-made game that it's just really fun. I think that's the extent of it, really.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. The sum of all of the great parts came out to be this, in Battlefield 3's case, a great game, and then in Battlefield 4's case, and eventually a fantastic game. because again, like it did have a lot of terrible launch issues and performance issues and all the fun stuff that we've come to know and love about dice games. But yeah, I think I was watching Jack Frags go back and play. He just recently uploaded a video, and I was watching it and just bathing in the nostalgia. Even though like I didn't go back, I never grew up with Battlefield 4, but there is this nostalgia to it almost, even to someone who didn't like grow up playing that game. But like just in terms of the map design, locker room, metro, Shanghai, all of those maps, the city maps, every single aspect of it was so well designed and well thought out. There was nothing there that didn't serve a purpose or at least set the stage. And I think that's comparison to like Battlefield 2042. What we see in the concept art is this torn up, worn down universe, this world in turmoil, people displaced. And I think Battlefield 4 captures that way better than Battlefield 2042 does, because Battlefield 2042 is almost like a utopia, and it favors that vehicle play way more than any other past games. And I think I was looking at some of the breakdowns that they did when they launched Battlefield 4 around the map design and how they said, okay, this center section, see here, this is specifically for infantry. We don't care about vehicles here. They can reach in there, but we don't care about them. You see this band around this section? That's specifically for vehicles. We care about vehicles in this area. So this area is going to be well thought out for vehicles. And the center section, we don't care. Who cares if a vehicle can get there? We don't. That's specifically infantry play. And then outside of the vehicle realm, they had a mix. So it had almost this ring structure for a lot of these maps where you had the key points accessible by the infantry for the infantry. And then you had almost the support of the vehicles versus having that focus beyond the vehicles, and really fell at mastering the level of infantry play.
Yeah, I think for me that like the map design in both 3 and 4, the really like city sort of feeling to all of those maps, even the ones that weren't necessarily a city, they had like the little, like I'm thinking of Goldmud Railway, where it was very open, but it had that section up the top that was just buildings, and like that was where I always went, because that was where the infantry sort of action took place. So I think that's for me one of the main differences between pretty much all, because every Battlefield that I think of, maybe not so much Battlefield 5, I didn't really like the map design that much in that game, but Battlefield 1 and like backwards, they all just had such good map design to where, there was like, I just knew the areas that I wanted to play in, and there were whole areas of the maps that I didn't really go to because they were, so full of vehicles and stuff. But that's good, like having, because people do want to play vehicles, having that for them. Yeah. And they can enter into the city, but if they want to do that, they're going to get blown up by C4 and stuff. Like
exactly, it didn't drastically affect you as an infantry player. Yeah,
exactly. Like they could come into the areas where it was mainly infantry, but those areas were kind of built up to actually favor infantry against tanks. If you're in a street and there's buildings on both sides, how are you going to know that someone's not just sitting there with the C5 waiting to roll in? So it's like, I think that's what's mainly missing from 2042 in the map design, is that it is just very open, and there's no, on any map that I can't tell you one spot where it's like an infantry focused map. Maybe Kaleidoscope in that center building, but that's like so.
But even then, I've got the hovercraft in there.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I think that's one of the things that Battlefield 4 and 3 nailed. Was just I love, like, I'm a very infant, like we all know, you and I both say it so much that we're both infantry
This should be called
players.
The Infantry Show.
And I'm also, like, a very aggressive, like, fast-paced player, because I've played Call of Duty for longer than Battlefield, so I'm used to that like rushing play style. So those city buildings, the city maps where there's like heaps of buildings, that is like my favorite type of level design, because I can go and get in and amongst those buildings and have that close quarters action. And really, in Battlefield 2042, there just isn't that much close quarters action, which is probably my main issue with the map design, I think.
I'm trying to find a good way to explain it, but there are so many places that aren't are so much better designed in real life that it's hard to kind of build a comparison to it. But like if you go to like a fast food restaurant in America or something like that, or maybe the mall, you have this vast expanse of parking, like just freaking so much parking. No way is that ever going to be filled out with cars. But you have this vast expanse, and you maybe have a few trees scattered throughout there. And then you have these key points, but completely around these key points are accessible by every single vehicle. And like that's the design style of Battlefield 2042's maps. And I don't know, because they didn't really nail down necessarily how they were using AI, but they did say that they were using AI in conjunction with actual map developers and design directors around that in the creation of these maps. So maybe that's just a level of, they had these parameters that they laid out that the AI set in place first. And then they went through and said, oh, okay, we're going to put a bush here, we're going to put this here, but we're going to put this here. But overall, it was just kind of like this flat expanse of a sandbox.
Yeah, it definitely does feel that way. Like it feels, pretty much all the maps feel like, yeah, they were like randomly generated and they put stuff on them, if that makes sense. When in previous games, it felt like the map was obvious, and they were completely designed from scratch. They would obviously have like the concepts for how it would be laid out, then they actually went and developed that. And again, I don't know if that's actually, they did talk about it. Neither of us know the extent to how they did it, so we could be both wrong, but it does feel like that, where it's just it's like when you make a Minecraft server and it just randomly generates like the layout of the map, and they've just done that and gone like, yeah, that'll do, and then we'll change it around and stuff. Whether that's what happened or not, that is definitely how it feels. Because
they all have a similar vibe. Like they had a copy and paste template, or they had like a database that they had built from, and then it put out this specific output.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. The map design is just weird to me. I don't even like when I play. I don't necessarily dislike it, but it's just feels weird. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. And I definitely, as much as I say I don't dislike it, I think previous games, I loved all of those maps. There's very few maps in pretty much any of the older ones, other than, again, Battlefield 5. I didn't really
But even
like
Battlefield 5 had a lot of specific infantry areas, and most of them were pretty well thought out. I mean, again, some of, what is the British map there where they have the field, and then the cityscape. That's almost like a little bit too much like a Battlefield 2042 map, but it's still, especially towards the end of that life with those new maps, they had a lot more heavy focus on, okay, we hear the feedback that you had around infantry, so we're going to fix that for you guys.
Yeah, and I think the thing that they did better in Battlefield 5, there wasn't as much, like, there weren't as many buildings other than, say, a map like Rotterdam, for example, which, like, those were my favourite maps, the ones that had, like, the city feeling. But
Rotterdam's so good.
Yeah, such a good map. But the ones that, even, like, I'm thinking of all the Pacific maps, they were very, like, terrain-based, but they still had enough cover, like, natural cover, like rocks, and they put in the trenches, and, like, there was enough there that you didn't need buildings on those maps. It would have been probably nice to have some more buildings, because that was my main issue, that there was a lot of open areas.
So many snipers.
Yeah, but I think even without the buildings there, they managed to have enough like terrain cover that was just natural, or like I said, the trenches or whatever. They put stuff into the terrain rather than having to put buildings there, and I think that was something I really hope that they do that with 2042 when they're redesigning these maps, that they put in trenches, put in sandbag bunkers all around the place. Like, this is meant to be a war. And I get on some of the maps they're trying to go for, like, the war's starting. Like, this is the first battle in Kaleidoscope. I get that, but that doesn't make sense to me. Like, it's...
Yeah, but before the war, you have battles. You have moments where the no-pats are building out tents underneath the bridges. You have these people like that. That's one of the things that is so missing from Battlefield 2042 in a very interesting way, because they set this great storyscape of this world in turmoil. These people that have been displaced through these battles and through these movements of these governments, and we don't see that in the map design. We don't see it in the characters. We don't see it in all of these different aspects of the game itself. But I think would add so much more to the maps as a whole. Like, have these buses that were turned into housing. I mean, it's 2042, so I imagine van lifers are still a thing, especially with the rise of the non-patriated.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is they should have just. It doesn't even have to be military stuff. It can just be stuff that makes sense in that world. Literally just tents. Like all these people are saying there's like so many refugees and like homeless people essentially. And why is there nowhere that these people are like living? There's no. We see in the concept art there was those big like sort of like medic tents, I guess you would say, where they're helping.
Or the
like,
flooded city that we saw in the cinematic.
Yeah, and like it's weird that, again, it must just be one of those things where they just didn't have the time yet, and maybe that's the issue. But it feels, if that wasn't the case, then it's confusing why that wasn't put into the maps already. Because I feel like the actual design of the maps, even though we said it feels weird, the like landscape, I think if they can fix that with cover, then that fixes that issue. So it's not like they need to necessarily redesign the actual terrain. They just need to
it'd be great, but even bare minimum, just having more cover.
Yeah,
like looking at the map as a whole from a top-down view and saying, okay, let's actually map this out and say, okay, these are the points that people are going to be clamoring for. Maybe this specific point is geared towards vehicle play, and these other points are necessary for infantry. Maybe we have a mixed one. And then in between these points, we have these outposts. We have these moments that you can get into a battle between. They may not necessarily go for the objective, but they're going to have these fun moments that you can experience that tell these stories. Because I think a lot of the things with Battlefield 2042 is like, if you basically dragged the corner of the image and without holding shift and just squished it tiny, it cut it in half. If you moved everything closer, you'd have a lot more of a cohesive experience because everything's closer, and you don't have, like in Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5 even, Battlefield 4 definitely, as you go through these points, you're getting to micro skirmishes on each path to claim the objective.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that probably frustrates me the most with the map design in 2042 is that, in between, like I'll go cap, I'm thinking of, say, Orbital. We'll go get the C sector down the bottom, and then like going from there to the D sector, I don't see anyone. Like that's just no man's land. There's nothing actually happened there. There might be a random sniper once every, 3 games you'll see a sniper sitting up there, but
someone driving a vehicle to get to the other point.
Yeah. So, like you said, in Battlefield 4, like say, I don't know, Siege of Shanghai, when you're going from not even the tower, but like the other, I think it was D and E down on the right. When you go from one of them to the next one, sure, there's going to be people at the actual flag defending it, but in between, there's that crossover where you're trying to attack them, they're trying to attack you, and you meet in the middle, and you're like, oh, this I didn't expect this, and you get into these little battles, and you might win that, but then you go, oh damn, we lost 2 of our boys, we've got to stay alive and let them respawn, then we can go attack the next flag. And it added a lot of life between the areas of the actual like focal points of the map. There was you could run around in just the most random spot and find enemies, whereas I feel like in 2042 it's just like everyone's kind of, weirdly enough, everyone's on the objectives, yet even when I'm on the objectives I don't see enough people. So it's like I don't know, it's a weird dynamic. I don't really know I can't put a finger on what's wrong, but I think the scale and like you said, it's all like spread out a bit too much. If they condensed it a bit and add an extra building here and there, add some more cover, like I think that would, even just that would really make a big difference.
What I'm missing is kind of like the Siege of Shanghai vibe, where you have these gigantic buildings, and that was, when was that base? 2020, I think, right? I
think so, yeah.
In 2020, they're building these cities. They got so many things right in that game. They have these big buildings. They're super close to each other. They're developing upwards, like you kind of would in a city. You're developing upwards and not kind of spreading out. And even these giant cities in Battlefield 2042, you're missing that level of advancement. You almost kind of want to draw some inspirations from like a cyberpunk-esque genre movie or game, even, where you have these cities, these people just kind of on top of each other, clamoring for space, trying to get a grasp of sunshine. But we don't see that. Everything's like, man, actually, I can understand why Angel's so happy is because everything looks pretty nice.
Yeah, it's that's a good point. That like even the tall buildings in this game, they kind of have no life to them. They're just like a big structure. And I'm thinking of like Orbital, the big like tower, the B tower. That literally, it looks massive and it looks cool, but when you actually think about it, it is essentially
It's like 3 floors.
Yeah, and like no one. I don't know if I've really ever gotten into a fight on the like those like catwalk things. It's really the top of it or the bottom, and that's really all it is. And so it looks cool. And if they could have had that, have more levels, and it was more, I don't know, just designed to where like there was actually a point to be in the middle, for example.
Yeah.
Then that would be a really cool section of the map. But for me, it's like you just kind of fight over the top, and because it's pretty, it's the top's just open, so like you kind of just. Everyone dies quickly, and then you're like, oh, okay, I guess we go to the next flag. So
yeah,
it
would almost been cool if there was a map that was just one big building. Like you have these different mismatched levels, you have these balconies, even that kind of cross over with another space. So you have a little bit of that mix of the outdoor. Obviously, it's infantry only, but you have these different levels, and you have a lot more ways that you can get up and down levels. Because I think that was the big thing too, is with these big buildings, they're very easily controlled in a way that makes sense in terms of if this was real life, this is the way it would work. But in a game, you have to have that balance of, okay, yes, well, it would make sense to have this at the top and only one way to get up there. That does not work for a game and balance play.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's what's so disappointing about the all of the towers, even like on Hourglass and stuff. It's like they're kind of pointless because you can't. If there's enemies on top, you just can't get up there. Like it is as simple as that. You cannot get up there unless you do a coordinated attack with your team or something. Like even the early breakthrough days when the capture points were on top, like you just couldn't do it because there's only one. There's like one elevator and one zip line, for example. And if literally 32 people are camping that, like you're just not getting out of that. So I think that's one area that really lets it down, is that it's like it's so one-dimensional, I guess you would say. I don't know how to put it.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of like Locker or Metro, those, I mean, Locker specifically, it's 2 levels, and it has such a fun level of play there, of intense action. I would have loved to see it even like expanded a little bit bigger. Not too much, but 128 players in Locker would have been insanely fun. Like, it'd be complete madness, but it would be so much fun.
Yeah, I think, like we've said, that's the thing that's missing for me, is that just pure infantry gameplay. I'm all for having vehicles and stuff, and I know that they've got a place in the game, but at the moment it feels like a vehicle simulator where you can play as infantry, and that's for me, and I think for most people, like there are definitely a lot of people who like vehicles, but I think, like, if I had to guess, I would say 90% of the player base likes running around as a trooper. Like that's it's a first-person shooter. That's what most people buy it for. So the fact that I think that's probably a big part of it, that 90%, or whatever that number actually is, like that's a lot of people that aren't going to like it. Whereas the vehicle mains, they're probably having the best time of their life because they're playing on maps that are just farming simulators. But for the rest of us, it's tough.
I was watching a Flackfire video, and he was breaking down his thoughts on it too, and just kind of what his suggestions were. And he's someone that said it himself. He's like he enjoys some vehicle play sometimes, and it's gotten to the point where he is only going to play vehicles because you have to be successful. You have to play vehicles, and you have to be a sniper. But just because of how the map is designed, it forces you into one of those or both of those positions.
Yeah, that's very true. Like, yeah, it's there's so many open. Like I was playing yesterday, and I was playing on Hourglass, and there's just so much open space that if you're not a sniper on that map, like you're not, unless you can get to the, if you get a vehicle and get to the stadium, for example, you can do well there. But
yeah,
if you've capped that and there's no enemies there, well then enjoy sitting waiting, because there's not much else you can really do. So it's very odd design, but I'm also keen to see how they tackle the redesigns, and whether it's just like, I'm kind of nervous that it's going to be very basic stuff. Like they'll just put a couple things here and there, and they'll be like, "Yeah, we redesigned the maps." I hope that they go into full depth and like I would honestly, I'd prefer, rather than them adding a new map, I'd rather like genuine redesigns to where it's still the same map, but it's just like you can notice the difference.
Don't move just the objective. Actually, move some of the aspects. Add a couple buildings here. Change these things up, maybe shrink the boundaries a little bit. I think that would be much more impactful to everyone's experience, and just build some, instead of trying to be the all-around map, specialize. Say, okay, we're gonna make a map that is more suited to this group. And I think too, something that they should add on top of that is a browser, so you can see what maps are being played, so you can make those decisions. Because I think one of the things that is also happening is their stats are very, very much skewed just because of the infrastructure in the game itself. People are just playing random maps without control, so you can't really tell people's favorites, and you can't really make the correlation that someone who quits early, it's not always because of the map. Sometimes they just get dropped. So I don't think they're getting that accurate information that they maybe need from those experiences.
And the other thing is, like with previous games, even games where there wasn't like the voting power, you can still tell the people like, if you get to a certain map in the rotation, because each server generally had like a set rotation, and everyone starts quitting, then that's probably not a favorite map. Whereas in 2042, you literally get kicked every game, so there's no one's leaving for any specific reason. They're leaving because you literally kick them from the lobby. So it's
I don't know how many times I got orbital in a row.
Oh, dude, that's my number one thing that I want, is just a server browser. I was trying to play yesterday, and with how small the player base is at the moment, I'm like just struggling to find games. Whereas if there's a server browser, at least everyone will like meet in the middle and find one server, even if it's not the mode they like. At least you know where everything is. So at the moment, it's like it's actually getting hard to. I was searching at like 3:00 yesterday, every mode, and it was like a struggle to find games. I found one server of Conquest, and once I got into that, like once the game ends, even though you get kicked, everyone was kind of getting back into the same lobby. But it's like for example, I usually stream tomorrow around this time. I'm thinking I'm probably gonna have to stream Star Wars Hunters on my other channel, because I don't think I'll actually be able to find a game. So that's a big issue that I really hope they can get around to. They've talked about that they're working on it, but I really hope that's not a season 1 thing. That needs to happen in like March or April, or I'd fear that there will not even be a player base in a lot of countries by the time season 1 actually arrives.
Yeah, I was looking a couple days ago too, in terms of the Steam stats list on how many people are playing each game, and it's crazy to actually look at that and say, oh, okay, this is how many people are playing right now. And you kind of have to make those assumptions, like, okay, when do I think people are going to be playing right now? And this was, let's see here, 5 days ago I looked, and Battlefield 5 was at a solid 20,000 players that day. Battlefield 1 had almost 8. Battlefield 2042 had 4,000, and Battlefield 4 had 2,000.
Damn. It's very sad to see, honestly. Like, I'm all for like people just being, moving on to something else until it gets fixed. But it's sad when it's at the point when it's feels like the game's like lifespan is finished, kind of thing, and that's so sad, man.
Looking at these numbers, it would make more sense to revive the Battlefield 5 expansion plans that they had.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we're bringing content back to Battlefield 5. I've had this conversation with a few friends of mine. Like, it almost feels like games just need more time than they were used to, and we're still under the expectations, both from internally and externally with game development companies, of the same amount of time that they had previously, when it's so indicative of all of these games releasing and be like, well, this game needed at least another year to bake. In Battlefield 2042's case, it could have done another year and maybe some. And if you look at the terms of, let's see, we had the game released in November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June at the earliest. That's 8 to maybe 9 months until new content, and the state that the game needed right off the get-go. It's like, guys, you probably just should have delayed it 12 months if you're just going to be in this state already.
Yeah, I really hope that this is not even just for Battlefield, but like this is just a common thing with multiplayer games at this point. They need to, like, I really hope that this is a wake-up call and like they just don't do that again. Like,
yeah.
Just like maybe launch the next one properly, kind of thing. Like, that would be
put the
cool,
expectations. Take the data that you have, because EA and DICE, we know you love data because you're using it to fuel all these decisions, whether or not you're using the right data.
Yeah.
Look at it and actually say, oh, hey, our systems right now, they aren't really working very well to release a functioning game, so let's give it some more time. Let's involve game changers. Let's involve these group of people that have, in most cases, I'd say, more experience with the franchise than DICE does right now.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of the game changers and like just players in general, it's not even just the game changers. Like, I think, like, I know for a fact there are people at that company that I know so much more about Battlefield than they do. And that's not, you don't have to, when you get a job somewhere, you don't have to be well versed in the entire history of the game or something. But
yeah,
it's like, use the people that actually are willing, like, not even just game changers, just do play tests. I've seen so many games in the last few years that they will do, like, even that World War III game, like, they're doing open playtests like a year before it even launches.
Yeah.
Like, do that.
Halo
Who cares
Infinite.
if it's, yeah, like, who cares? I don't know why everything has to be so secretive for, like, they keep all the, noise around the game until, like, say, June, and then they do the big trailers and then they launch it 6 months later. I don't care. Like, just get your game right. No one, if you want to build hype, that is a good way to do it. But people are still going to be hyped if they're able to play the game and see
and you
what
can
it's like in
control
advance.
that hype. And I think that's the biggest thing, is you need to be able to control and shape expectations in a way that's going to benefit your game. And I think that was definitely one of the many problems with Battlefield 2042, is we had so many expectations because, one, they weren't communicating, and two, the communication that we did have was in the form of cinematic trailers, and those cinematic trailers were heavily focused on the past game of Battlefield 4, which everyone loves, and they love the content, the flow of it. So it made us assume, wrongly, that this was going to be the next Battlefield 4, and they were going to look at, I mean, when you have Irish graves in the game, like, what else are you going to assume that the game's going to be like?
Yeah, that's one of the main things that I've got an issue with, that, and it probably sounds so biased because I'm in the game change program, that it's like, oh, just let me play it. But it's like, so many more people should be able to play it, not just game changers.
Yeah,
Do
well, in
some
the past they've done
stuff.
that, right?
Yeah, Like
Battlefield 1, they specifically took into account people's feedback. Battlefield 5 was iffy just because of the development cycle, but even then they did have some kind of feedback. Like that's historically, that's kind of how they did it with Battlefield, is they had, I mean, it's one of those games where people who love Battlefield. So take their information into account.
Yeah, it's I don't know what it is with, like, companies are so afraid to, like, ask for help. Like, I think they come across as like, oh, we're the developers, we should know what we're doing. So if we ask for help, it's like weakness, or it's like, oh, everyone's going to like have backlash and like, oh, they don't even know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. I don't think anyone cared. Maybe there'd be people for sure saying that, but like the core player base, they would not care if you say like, what do you want? Like, we've got our outline of the game and what we want, but that isn't just... like, what we want isn't necessarily everything, because at the end of the day, if we want it and it sucks and you don't want it, then that's not good, is it? So,
yeah.
like, I'm all for them, like, setting up, you know, initially they obviously have to set up their own outline for the game, what they want to do, the story, all of that stuff. Yeah, and then get that, show it off a little bit, get people's, like, thoughts on it. If people are like, I don't really like the specialist idea, like, get their feedback on that and try and change it before the game launches. Mm-hmm. Because,
what scares me is the decisions that they're making with the delay of the content, and also this almost radio silence around the game, except for like small bug patches where they have to put something out. Is they're almost making those same decisions that they made before the game came out. It's like, okay, guys, we've heard your feedback. We kind of know what game you want. We're going to come back and we're going to relaunch this game, and we may not take into all the feedback. Like, if we have that kind of repetitive cycle of someone who works in marketing, I'm always like, okay, I'm going to send you this thing. What are some of the things that you like, what you don't like? Okay, let's adjust those. Okay, let's give you this next draft. And that it's an iterative process. Yeah,
I remember, and I'm sure you'll remember this with Battlefront 2, the community transmissions. They were often a lot of those that weren't even like announcements for stuff. I remember Ben did one that was just showing off what they had currently planned for like the clone commandos and stuff, and it wasn't like, this is what's happening. They were like, this is where we're up to on working on them. They showed the gif of Obi-Wan in the open, you know, this what's it called, the grey box or whatever.
Yeah,
they were showing stuff and like showing us how it works to a certain extent, and actually asking, not directly asking for feedback, but they were like showing the stuff. And then when people were like, oh, the commando's got this, oh, that could be overpowered, and then they actually like took a look at all that stuff.
Yeah,
they need to do that for this game. They've done it with the scoreboard once, but like, do it. Give us updates every fortnight. Like, you don't. It's free. You don't have to do anything. If you educate your community, they will give you better feedback the next time you bring something to them. Yeah.
If they're just in the dark, like look at the scoreboard mock-up that they had. It was horrible. I mean, it was better than what they had in the game, but in terms of all of the mock-ups of the community that they had brought up to that point, didn't compare to anything that the community had thought up in terms, or even the past Battlefield games. Like, even if they copied and pasted Battlefield 1's UI into there in the scoreboard and everything, it would be more effective than the current one, or even the second version of the scoreboard. But they wouldn't have known that feedback unless they shared that image and got that feedback.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, like, they need to... It's something that it really frustrates me, because communication is quite literally free. You don't have... They've already got community managers. They don't need to hire someone else to come in and do it. Just literally tell us what's going on. It's going to improve your like relationship with the player base so much. Like, that alone, without the content, if just from now until season 1, they just talk to us every week, every other week, that would have me way more hyped, because like at the moment I'm just kind of playing just when I'm bored. Whereas if they show off a new thing the next day, I'm going to be like, damn, I kind of want to play Battlefield today. So it's
exactly. That's so right. Like, you're going to play the game more so you can offer better feedback. And if you have, like, I mean, yes, ultimately DICE is going to have the yes or no decisions. Maybe there's something that is not just necessarily feasible or pays off in terms of the effort it would take. But also they put in a tornado that took up most of the development time. So they also are in that place where they made a decision that took up way too much time from the other things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just it's the way to fix any, like, even real life issues. Communication is like if you're having struggles with your partner, communicate with each other and you'll fix it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not rocket science, and it's not going to cost them millions of dollars. They don't get Freeman and Kevin and those guys to just tweet it out. Get them to have one meeting a week and say, all right, what can we just quickly mention? It doesn't need to be a 30-minute freaking video showing off stuff. Just literally do a blog post that, you know, they could probably write it in an hour. And it doesn't even have to be every week, every fortnight, whatever. Just some sort of communication on what we're getting. Because, you know, they did the big announcement with what was going to be happening, the delay, all that kind of thing. They talked about the new feedback loop. Well, I haven't seen them say one sentence since then. Not one thing. They have not.
Guys, we're going to take your feedback into account. Oh, yeah? Like you did last time? Yes, exactly.
Like, it's so...
Are you going to listen to us? Well, yes, but actually, no.
It's just so weird that's the thing that makes me nervous. If they're going to make all these promises and go on about, like, this is what we're going to do, we promise we'll fix it, that's all well and good, but if you can't even do the simple thing of just communicating like you literally said in the post, if you can't do that, how am I expected to believe that you're going to fix the maps? How are you going to fix the specialist system if you can't even tweet to me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's, I don't know, that they have, and I don't know if it's like a higher up thing, because I know that, like, Kevin and Freeman, those guys are like such good, you know, community managers. I don't know if it's them or if it's like a higher up decision of like, no, we can't talk about this and this and this. So I don't know where I
would bet you $1,000 right now that it is a higher up managerial position that they're in. Someone in the decision-making team or even the policies in the company are restricting them from fully doing their job well.
Yeah, and that's so... I can't imagine how frustrating it must be for the guys like Freeman and Kevin. Like, they probably want to tell us this stuff and they literally can't even do it. It's such a frustrating situation that like, it's such an easy thing to do. Like, I'll come and sign as many NDAs as you want and I'll do it for free. I'll literally communicate for the company for free and sign NDAs so that I'm not leaking it all and stuff. And it can't be that hard that they have to spend freaking 2 weeks to talk about, you know, to think up how we're going to talk about this or this. When it's simple.
Guys,
maybe
what's the wording? Should we use a there right there? Or should we use us? Should we use this? Should we capitalize the T here? Should the sentence end here? Like, what the heck, guys? We need to make these decisions before we put this tweet out. Like, no,
that's how it feels, man. That's how it really feels. And I do know that, like, one thing that Ben Walk said about his community transmissions, he did say they take a lot longer than anyone thinks, but work in advance. Like, start working on the post for a month from now. Start working on that now, and like, get that out and have a constant flow of it.
The flow. If there is a policy or a order that is limiting, I've seen. I think Xbox had this moment with Phil Spencer when he took over. There was a lot of those situations where he went through and said, hey, why is this thing run this way? Well, it's because Jeff wanted this position. Like, what? Who cares? Insert person name. They wanted responsibility of this, but they also had responsibilities of all these other things, and it slowed down. Look at the things that are inhibiting you from communicating well and try to put in places or take away policies that are limiting you in those ways. Just kind of like a side tangent, when I was really into Apex, I recently booted up for the new season, but early on in the first few seasons, like, I put on notifications for Respawn and I had to turn them off because there were so many. I had notifications for all their tweets, and good gravy, I was buzzing the entire day because they had like hourly posts about any changes that they were making.
Yeah, and then, like, I've got my notifications on for Battlefield, and it's like maybe once every fortnight I feel.
It's tweeting concept art that doesn't look anything like that.
Half of it's, I get a tweet notification from Battlefield. I'm like, ooh, some news. And it's like, no, here's how to play Conquest. It's like, thanks, mate. I already know that. I can't find a game because you're not communicating, but when I can find a game, I'm sure now I know how to play Conquest.
Yep. Exactly. And even it's hilarious to me that they had to make a secondary Twitter account for other people to follow so they could give people feedback and updates around what's happening with the game. Like, that honestly shouldn't be a secondary account. But for some reason they had to make it a secondary account for some reason. Who knows? But
See, for me, I kind of don't mind that. I don't think it is necessary, but I think having a separate one that is like for the day-to-day stuff, which the unfortunate thing is that account doesn't even tweet either. It tweets like once a month. But
yeah,
if that was going to do what Respawn was doing, like, that's kind of what I thought when they started anyway, that would be, tweet every other day or whatever. That I think I'm fine with that, because then you have the main Battlefield account for like trailers or whatever, and then have like the direct communication for like having actual comms with the community. And I think if it was tweeting enough, it would make sense. How it is now, it's kind of redundant, because none of them tweet enough. You could just have it all on one account, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with it in and of itself. I have an issue with it in terms of that is the amount of struggles they have with putting out communication, is they had to put another Twitter account. Yeah.
It is definitely something drastic needs to change at the company. Like, it's become very obvious that it doesn't seem like it's an incompetence of the people working there. Like I said, I know for a fact Kevin and Freeman, they are like great at what they do.
Yeah.
But
just look at what they did with Battlefront. And that was...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That was craziness.
And so it seems like it's not an issue of like, oh, they need to sack some people and hire new people. It's more like something is blocking all this, like what needs to happen. And yeah, like you said, if it's a policy or maybe one of the higher ups or whatever's going wrong, they need to, like, that is a necessity. That is probably the number one thing they need to fix, more than the game itself. Because if you can communicate with your player base and actually make people understand what's going on and like actually have some sort of relationship there, then people will be a little bit more forgiving. But even if they fix the game and they're not even talking about it, then when they go to launch the next game, people are just going to have that memory still in their head that, there's going to be no communication. They're not going to tell us what's going on. So for me, that is the absolute number one thing to fix, is the communication. And as far as I can tell, it's probably the easiest thing to fix. It's not like they'd have to spend months fixing the maps. They need to literally just change a policy or, change the way they do things.
Hey guys, the team on the UI side have started work on this new scoreboard, blah, blah, blah. We'd love to hear your feedback. Some of the things, what do you want to see on the scoreboard? Whether or not they even take into account any of the replies, it's still that communication. Oh, hey, the team just started doing some new reworks of this map. What are your thoughts on this section? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, that's all.
And that's the frustrating part, is they did it with the scoreboard. So it was like, oh, this is good. This is what we want. And then it's been radio silent since then. So like, I think exactly what they did with the scoreboard, that is perfect. They showed us, here's what we've got. To be fair, it was absolute dog. I don't know how they thought that was a good design, but they said, here's what we've got. We all gave our feedback, and then they've improved on it, and it will be better because of that. And we're all kind of, about that specifically anyway, we're all like kind of happy. Like, they said, here's what we got. We helped them fix it, and it's better. That's like a sort of community bonding in a way. And it was all perfect, but they haven't done it enough. They haven't done it with, here's how we're thinking of redesigning the maps. Here's how, they mentioned about the specialists. We've got people analysing them. Tell us what you're analysing. You don't have to tell us your outcomes. Just say, we're looking at, I don't know. It doesn't even need to be detailed. Just literally, here's what we're looking at, rather than, we're going to look at the specialists. Like, just tell us slightly more in depth what you're talking about in the initial post, with everything. Tell us, what else maybe they're planning for season 1. If it's so far away now, are we going to get any more content? Or are we going to get less content to focus on it being high quality? Like, just
act like a teenager who just started their first YouTube channel. Hype up everything. Oh, hey, guys, I just wrote the script to my new video. Yeah. Oh, my gosh, look at this. I recorded some gameplay. Oh, my gosh, you're definitely going to check this out. Blah, blah, blah. It's going to come out this day. Oh, well, it didn't come out this day, but these are the reasons why it didn't come out this day. Like, that's the mindset you need to have.
Yeah, legit. It feels so easy to do that, but again, it must be something more in depth that we just don't know about. But I really hope they can fix that, because it's so frustrating. It adds to the frustration of the game like 10 times more than the actual game itself when there's just radio silence.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much opportunity here, and like when you have hit rock bottom, there's only one way that you can go, and it's up. So please, I mean, hopefully there's only one way you can go.
No, please don't. Oh, God.
This is rock bottom, right, guys?
About that, please.
Okay, I think we're rock bottom. Never mind, we're not. We found a new level. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This was a good conversation, just talking about that. I think next episode, I'm going to spend some time going through and looking at the UI, and let's kind of put together some thoughts around what we'd like to change on the UI front, some of the things that we'd love to get touched on. Also, if you're listening to this right now, if you have thoughts on the UI, which I know you do, send us a message. You can contact us on Twitter, the description of this YouTube video, a contact@uplinkpodcast.com for email. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you have mock-ups, we'd love to see those too. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of The Battlefield Show. If you'd like to support us, definitely do leave us a review. It helps out a ton and gets us your feedback. And more importantly, if you have some buddies that you're still playing Battlefield with, share the show. It helps us a ton. And that's one of the best ways to help us out, is sharing it with your friends. And one of the best ways to expand this community that we have. So thank you all so much for listening. Thanks, Ethan Clark, for the beautiful thumbnail. And we'll see you all on the battlefield.